Can you talk more about your philosophy of plausibility in game design?
So plausibility is basically, does the game world, the game idea, the concept, does it pass the sniff test? Doesn't necessarily have to pass much more deep thinking and so on, but does it make sense, or does something in it, or the implications of something in it, does that break the whole game world or not? That's the big question that you have to answer to see if your game idea passes plausibility or not. I aim for plausibility because absolute realism is incredibly dull for the most part, and it's not what most people are looking for. Maybe some of your gearhead combat nuts survivalists would want an incredibly high fidelity, highly realistic system, but computer games can do that better, and even they mostly don't. So yeah, that's something to consider. So my therapist tells me that my problem is that I tend to be a second and third order thinker, which means that I don't just react or consider an action as a reaction to something, but I consider what that reaction will cause and what reactions to that reaction will cause. So, for example, you want to put dragons in your game because dragons are cool, right? Okay, fair enough. We can ignore a whole bunch of physics and so on. We can just have dragons. Okay, but what are the implications of having dragons? What's the effect upon the world? Okay, we've got this giant flying apex predator. It's got to be feeding on something. So, and a lot of some things, because flying takes a lot of energy. So massive herds of creatures are going to be a feature of this world, perhaps, or other megafauna is going to be around and more common. Maybe we can look into our past for past periods of giganticism in animals, because they're going to have to eat something, right? And if you have these things flying around that can breathe fire and maybe carry troops, what's the effect that's going to have? Oh, and the other megafauna we've just introduced, what effect is that going to have on farming and cities, castle design? How do you defend yourself against something that flies around? Or never mind the dragons, are we including magicians who can fly? Because if someone can hurtle past outside of arrow range and rain fireballs down on you, you've got things to worry about. Never mind the dragons. So, the part of plausibility is what are the knock-on effects of the unrealistic things that I include in my game. Another classic example would be that whole lightspeed ramming situation in Star Wars. That's not a thing in Star Wars up to that point, for good reason. And then it is allowed in that one film, and then that completely breaks whatever plausibility Star Wars might ever have had, because there's no need for a Death Star when you can ram a spaceship into a planet at some significant portion of the speed of light, right? It's a lot cheaper and easier. So that's plausibility, just enough realism or internal consistency to allow for the suspension of disbelief.